You won't believe the lengths Elvis Presley went to for safety. He received terrifying death threats, investigated by the FBI, often carried multiple hidden guns even while performing, and his close friends were basically his personal shield wall. The king of rock and roll lived a life under constant watch, not just by fans but by those tasked with protecting him from very real dangers. Number 8. His inner circle was basically a private army. Okay, so everyone knows Elvis had his crew, the legendary Memphis Mafia. But these guys weren't just buddies hanging out. Oh no! They were his first, and often last, line of defense. Think of them as a walking, talking security blanket, but way tougher. From the very beginning of his meteoric rise, Elvis surrounded himself with people he trusted implicitly. Friends from back home, family members, guys he met along the way who proved their loyalty. This wasn't just about companionship on the lonely road of superstardom. It was a deliberate security strategy. Who were these guys? Names like Red West, Sonny West, Red's cousin, Joe Esposito, Lamar Fike, Charlie Hodge, Marty Lacker, Alan Fortas, and others became synonymous with Elvis's world. Many of them had specific roles. Sure, road manager, tour manager, taking care of the wardrobe, fetching things. But everyone's primary job, unspoken or not, was protecting the king. They were his eyes and ears, constantly scanning crowds, checking out suspicious individuals and literally putting their bodies between Elvis and potential harm. Imagine walking into a room, and instead of just seeing Elvis, you see him surrounded by a dozen or so watchful, often physically imposing men. That alone was a deterrent. They traveled with him everywhere, on tour, to movie sets, back home to Graceland, even on late-night excursions for donuts or movies. They lived at Graceland or in houses nearby, always on call, 24/7. Their presence was constant, a human fortress around the king. They weren't necessarily trained security professionals in the modern sense, especially in the early days. Many learned on the job. Red and Sonny West, in particular, were known for their physical capabilities and willingness to handle trouble. They dealt with overzealous fans trying to rush the stage or grab at Elvis. They managed crowd control, sometimes forcefully. They screened people who wanted access to Elvis, acting as gatekeepers to his private world. If a situation felt off, if someone seemed threatening, the Memphis Mafia was there to step in immediately. No questions asked. Think about the logistics. Elvis was arguably the most famous person on the planet. Everywhere he went, chaos threatened to erupt. Fans were passionate, sometimes dangerously so. There were also cranks, opportunists, and people who genuinely wished him harm. Having a large, loyal entourage meant there were always multiple people looking out for different angles, managing different aspects of his safety. One guy might be watching the front, another the back, someone else dealing with the cars, another handling the hotel arrangements. It was an organic, evolving system built on loyalty and shared experience. They carried firearms too, often gifted by Elvis himself. More on that later. They knew how to handle themselves in a tight spot. They were insiders who knew Elvis's habits, his routines, and who belonged in his circle and who didn't. This intimate knowledge was crucial. A professional security guard might not recognize a distant cousin or a long-time acquaintance, but the Memphis Mafia knew. They could spot an unfamiliar face instantly. This reliance on his inner circle wasn't just about physical protection. It was also about creating a buffer zone, a sense of normalcy, as normal as life could be for Elvis, and trust in a world that was often overwhelming and isolating. These men were his confidants, his friends, but make no mistake, their role as protectors was paramount. They were the first layer of the intricate security apparatus Elvis built around himself, a loyal band of brothers dedicated to keeping the king safe, whatever it took. Their constant presence, their watchful eyes, and their readiness to act were the foundation of his personal security for decades. Number 7. Graceland wasn't just a home, it was a fortress. When you think of Graceland, you probably picture the iconic music gates, the sprawling lawn, maybe the jungle room. But for Elvis, Graceland wasn't just his beloved home. It was his sanctuary, his safe zone, and he made sure it was protected accordingly. From the moment he bought the property in 1957, security was a major consideration, and it only increased over the years as his fame and the potential dangers grew. First off, the location itself offered a degree of seclusion. Back then, while it's on a main thoroughfare now, Elvis Presley Boulevard naturally, when Elvis bought it, the area was less developed, offering more privacy than a home right in the heart of Memphis. But that wasn't nearly enough. The most visible security feature, then and now, are the famous gates. These weren't just decorative. They were substantial barriers kept closed and monitored, controlling all access to the property. And who monitored them? There was always someone on duty at the gatehouse, a small building right inside the entrance. Often, these were members of Elvis's extended family, like his uncle Vester Presley, who became a familiar face to fans keeping vigil outside. Other security personnel, employed directly by Elvis, also manned the gates and patrolled the grounds. Their job was simple: keep unauthorized people out. No one got onto the property without permission. Deliveries were checked, visitors were announced, and fans were kept respectfully but firmly at bay. Beyond the gates, there was the famous stone wall that surrounds a good portion of the property. While fans famously write messages on it today, its original purpose was clear: create a physical barrier, enhance privacy, and make it harder for anyone to simply wander onto the grounds. The estate itself is large, offering a buffer between the house and the outside world. Inside the grounds, the Memphis Mafia played their part too. They were always around, providing an additional layer of security and vigilance. If someone did somehow manage to get past the gates, they wouldn't get far without encountering one of Elvis's crew. The house itself was his private domain. Access was strictly controlled, even for staff. Certain areas were off limits. Think about the constant stream of fans outside the gates. While many were harmless admirers, the potential for a security incident was always there. The guards had to be vigilant, watching for anyone trying to climb the walls or cause trouble. They managed the flow of people, ensuring the entrance wasn't blocked, and that things remained relatively orderly, despite the often emotional crowds. As technology evolved, Graceland likely saw upgrades, although the core remained the human element and physical barriers. The key was controlling access. Everyone who came onto the property was either known, invited, or working there, and their presence was noted. This wasn't like a normal suburban home, where friends might just drop by unannounced. Visits were arranged, clearance was given. Elvis felt safe at Graceland. It was his escape from the pressures of the road, the intensity of performing, the constant public scrutiny. He could relax there, be himself surrounded by familiar faces and protected by layers of security. The gates, the walls, the guards, the ever-present Memphis Mafia, they all contributed to making Graceland not just a mansion, but a true stronghold, a place where the king could retreat from the world and feel secure. It was his personal refuge, fortified against the intrusions and potential dangers that came with being Elvis Presley. The security wasn't ostentatious by today's standards perhaps, but it was constant, personal, and effective for its time, ensuring the king's castle remained his safe haven. Number 6. He was almost always armed to the teeth. Elvis Presley had a well-known fascination with firearms. This wasn't just a casual hobby. Guns were an integral part of his life and significantly his personal security strategy. The king didn't just own guns, he carried them often. And not just one. Sometimes multiple weapons were concealed on his person, a stark indicator of the level of threat he perceived, or at least prepared for. His collection was extensive, reportedly numbering in the hundreds. It included everything from pistols and revolvers to rifles and shotguns. He favored certain pieces like Colt, .45s, Smith & Wessons, and smaller Derringer pistols that were easily concealable. These weren't just locked away in a display case. They were working tools he kept readily accessible. Members of the Memphis Mafia and other close associates often told stories of Elvis having guns stashed all over Graceland, in his cars, and in his hotel rooms when traveling. But the most striking fact is that Elvis frequently carried concealed weapons on his body. Anecdotes abound of him tucking pistols into his waistband, carrying Derringers in his boots or ankle holsters. This wasn't just when he was out and about in potentially risky situations. Reports suggest he was often armed even during seemingly mundane activities or while relaxing at home. Some accounts even claim he occasionally carried a weapon concealed on stage during performances, particularly during periods when threats against him were high. Imagine that, the king singing "Love Me Tender" while secretly packing heat. Why? The heavy artillery. Part of it was undoubtedly his interest in guns themselves, the craftsmanship, the power, the symbolism. He enjoyed target practice and was reportedly a good shot. But a significant driver was personal protection. Elvis was acutely aware of his vulnerability. He received death threats throughout his career, some taken very seriously by law enforcement, including the FBI. Being constantly surrounded by adoring crowds also meant being surrounded by potential danger. Carrying a weapon likely gave him a sense of control and security in unpredictable environments. He didn't just arm himself. He armed his friends and protectors. Elvis was known for gifting firearms, often engraved or tied to members of the Memphis Mafia, police officers he befriended, and other associates. This wasn't just generosity. It ensured that the people closest to him, his first line of defense, were also equipped to handle trouble. If his entourage was armed, his overall security was theoretically stronger. He obtained permits to carry concealed weapons, leverage his fame and connections with law enforcement agencies across the country, which ties into another security aspect, his relationship with police. He collected honorary police badges which, while not granting legal authority, added to his image and perhaps offered a psychological edge or perceived legitimacy for carrying weapons. The image of Elvis Presley, the music entertainer, secretly carrying loaded weapons is jarring, but it because the reality he lived with, the constant presence of firearms, was a fundamental part of his security plan. Whether relaxing at Graceland, traveling the country, or even performing for thousands, the king was often prepared for the worst-case scenario with cold steel hidden beneath the jumpsuit or casual wear. It was a stark and perhaps grim necessity in his eyes, a constant reminder of the potential dangers lurking just beyond the spotlight. His personal arsenal wasn't just a collection, it was an active, ever-present element of his defense strategy. Number 5. He could literally kick butt with his black belt sense. Elvis wasn't just relying on bodyguards and firearms for protection. He took personal defense seriously and trained extensively in martial arts, specifically karate. This wasn't a fleeting interest or a publicity stunt. Elvis dedicated significant time and effort over many years to mastering the discipline, ultimately earning multiple black belts. He saw karate not just as a physical activity, but as a practical means of self-defense. His journey into martial arts began during his time in the U.S. Army, stationed in Germany in the late 1950s. He started training in Chito-ryu karate and quickly developed a passion for it. Upon returning to the States, he continued his training with various instructors, most notably the renowned Kenpo karate Master Ed Parker in California and Master Kang Rhee in Memphis, under whom he eventually tested for and received higher degree black belts. Elvis didn't just dabble. He trained rigorously, often for hours at a time. He built a dedicated space for training and sparring. He read books on martial arts, philosophy, and technique. His instructors consistently spoke of his dedication, discipline, and genuine skill. He achieved a first-degree black belt relatively early on, and continued progressing through the ranks over the years, reportedly reaching as high as 7th or 8th degree, Dan, in different systems, a significant accomplishment requiring years of persistent practice. Why was this so important to him? While he certainly enjoyed the physical challenge and the discipline, self-defense was a major motivator. In a world where he could be mobbed by fans or face potential attackers, having the skills to defend himself physically was a crucial layer of security. He couldn't always rely on his bodyguards being right next to him, especially in a sudden close-quarters situation. Karat gave him confidence in his own ability to handle a physical threat. He didn't keep his passion for karate to himself. He actively encouraged and often paid for members of the Memphis Mafia to train alongside him. Red West and Sonny West, already his primary physical protectors, became accomplished martial artists themselves under Elvis's encouragement. This meant his core security team wasn't just tough. They were trained fighters, capable of using specific techniques to neutralize threats effectively. Imagine a security detail where both the principal and the bodyguards are black belts. That's a formidable team. Elvis even incorporated karate into his stage performances, especially during his Las Vegas jumpsuit era in the 1970s. Those dramatic poses, high kicks, and quick hand chops weren't just showmanship. They were derived directly from his martial arts training. While stylized for the stage, they showcased his flexibility, speed, and power, and perhaps served as a subtle reminder to anyone watching that he wasn't just a singer, he could handle himself. There are numerous anecdotes about Elvis demonstrating his skills, sometimes playfully, sometimes more seriously. He'd spar with his friends and instructors, practice forms, catus, and break boards. He founded the Tennessee Karate Institute in Memphis, promoting the art he loved. His commitment was real, recognized by legitimate figures in the martial arts community. Ed Parker even served as one of his security advisors for a time. So, when considering Elvis's security measures, don't forget his personal fighting ability. While the guns and the bodyguards were essential, his dedication to karate provided another vital layer of protection. It empowered him personally, enhanced the capabilities of his security team, and gave him a practical skill set to rely on if ever face-to-face with danger. The king wasn't just protected, he was prepared to be the protector if needed, armed with years of disciplined martial arts training. Number 4. He collected police badges like souvenirs, and they weren't just for show. One of the more unusual aspects of Elvis Presley's security arrangements was his deep fascination with law enforcement and his extensive collection of police badges. This wasn't just a fan's admiration. Elvis actively cultivated relationships with police chiefs, sheriffs, and officers across the United States, and he eagerly accepted honorary badges, patches, uniforms, and even police equipment from them. While these honorary badges didn't typically grant actual police powers, they played a subtle but significant role in his security world. Elvis genuinely admired law enforcement officers. He saw them as symbols of authority, order, and protection, things he valued in his own increasingly chaotic life. He often expressed a desire to have been a police officer if he hadn't become an entertainer. This respect led him to seek out connections within police departments wherever he traveled. His fame, of course, opened doors, and many law enforcement officials were thrilled to meet the king, often presenting him with honorary credentials as tokens of esteem. His collection grew rapidly and became quite famous. He had badges from small towns and major cities, sheriff's departments, and even state police agencies. He proudly displayed some of them, and reportedly carried others with him. The most famous example of this connection is his impromptu meeting with President Richard Nixon in December 1970, during which Elvis requested and received a badge from the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, BNDD, a predecessor to the DEA. His stated goal was to help combat the drug culture he saw harming America's youth, positioning himself as an ally to law enforcement at the highest level. But how did this badge collection function as a security measure? It worked on several levels. Firstly, the connections themselves were valuable. Having the police chief of a city on friendly terms meant Elvis could often count on official police assistance when needed. Perhaps extra patrols around his hotel, police escorts for his motorcade through traffic, or quicker response times if an incident occurred. These weren't favors readily available to the average citizen, but for Elvis, his cultivated relationships often smoothed the way. Secondly, the badges themselves, even if honorary, carried weight. Flashing a badge or simply letting it be known he possessed such credentials could sometimes help Elvis and his entourage navigate tricky situations. It might grant them quicker access to certain areas, lend an air of official business to their movements, or simply make officials more cooperative. While not legally binding, the perception of authority could be powerful. Elvis reportedly kept badges and credentials in his cars, and sometimes carried them personally. There are accounts of him using flashing blue or red lights, obtained through these connections, on his personal vehicles, ostensibly for security reasons, to move more quickly or command attention. Furthermore, this association with law enforcement reinforced his personal security posture. It aligned him publicly with the forces of order, potentially deterring some would-be troublemakers. It also likely gave him and his team a greater sense of confidence, knowing they had allies within the official security structures of the places they visited. His interest wasn't just passive collecting. He sometimes wore police-style clothing or uniforms gifted to him. He owned police radios and scanners, listening in on official channels, perhaps partly out of interest and partly to stay informed about any potential disturbances or issues in his vicinity. This deep involvement with law enforcement culture, symbolized by his vast badge collection, was more than just a quirky hobby. It was an active strategy to leverage official authority and relationships for enhanced personal protection. It provided tangible benefits like police escorts and intangible ones like perceived authority and deterrence. It was another unique thread in the complex tapestry of security measures Elvis employed to navigate his world, blurring the lines between civilian superstar and honorary guardian of the peace. Number 3. Concerts had military-level crowd control tactics. Performing live was Elvis's passion, but putting the world's biggest star on stage in front of thousands of screaming, ecstatic fans presented a monumental security challenge. Over the years, especially during the touring-intensive 1970s, Elvis's team developed sophisticated, almost military-like precision in managing concert security and crowd control to protect both the king and his audience. The primary threat during concerts was the sheer, overwhelming adoration of the fans. While mostly harmless, the potential for stage rushes, crushing crowds near the front, or individuals trying to grab Elvis was constant and dangerous. Added to this was the ever-present possibility of a planned attack or disruption, fueled by the death threats he sometimes received. Security had to be prepared for anything. The operation started long before Elvis hit the stage. His advanced team, working with venue management and local police, would meticulously plan security logistics. This included establishing secure perimeters backstage, controlling all access points, and mapping out entry and exit routes for Elvis that minimized his exposure to uncontrolled crowds. Backstage passes were strictly limited and checked rigorously. Only essential personnel were allowed anywhere near the king before, during, or immediately after the show. During the performance itself, security was multi-layered. You had the venue's own security staff, often augmented by additional guards hired specifically for the show. Then there was the local police presence, which was often substantial, with officers positioned strategically around the venue, especially near the stage and backstage areas. And of course there was Elvis's personal security team, the Memphis Mafia Corps, sometimes supplemented by professional bodyguards like Ed Parker, or later men like Dave Hebler. Their positioning was key. Members of Elvis's team would typically be stationed right at the edge of the stage, forming a human barrier between him and the audience. Their eyes constantly scanned the crowd, looking for potential problems, people trying to climb onto the stage, disturbances in the audience, anyone acting suspiciously. They were under strict instructions on how to handle fans who got too close, intercept them quickly, firmly, but usually without causing excessive harm, and remove them from the restricted area. Red and Sonny West were particularly known for their effectiveness in physically blocking and managing fans who breached the security line. Communication was vital. Security personnel used hand signals, or had established protocols to alert each other to issues. If a serious threat emerged, plans were in place to get Elvis off stage and to safety immediately. This often involved specific escape routes and predetermined secure locations within the venue. The sheer scale of his concerts, especially in large arenas and stadiums, required meticulous planning. Crowd flow into and out of the venue was managed to prevent dangerous bottlenecks. Barriers were often erected in front of the stage to create a buffer zone. Lighting was also sometimes used strategically. Keeping the house lights dim while brightly illuminating the stage made it harder for people in the crowd to see clearly beyond their immediate area, while security could watch the audience more easily. Elvis himself played a role. While engaging with the audience by tossing scarves or shaking hands at the edge of the stage, he relied heavily on his security to manage the chaos this created. He knew where his security team was and trusted them implicitly to handle the ensuing surge of fans. After the show, the exit strategy was just as critical. Often, Elvis would leave the stage quickly while the house lights were still down and be whisked away in a waiting car before the bulk of the audience even realized the concert was officially over. This avoided him being mobbed during the mass exodus from the venue. Decoys were sometimes used with different cars leaving from different exits to confuse anyone trying to follow him. The level of planning, coordination, and manpower involved in securing an Elvis Presley concert was immense. It required close cooperation between his personal team, venue staff, and local law enforcement. Every show was a high-stakes operation, executed with practiced precision to ensure the king could deliver his performance safely amidst the frenzy he inevitably created. It was crowd control, elevated to an art form, born out of necessity. Number 2. Getting Elvis anywhere was a Secret Service level operation. For someone as famous as Elvis Presley, simply traveling from point A to point B was a complex logistical challenge fraught with security risks. Whether moving between cities for a tour, heading to a movie set, or just going out for the evening in Memphis, transporting the king required planning and execution that often resembled a Secret Service operation for a head of state. Privacy, speed, and minimizing exposure were paramount. Public transportation was out of the question. Commercial flights meant navigating crowded airports, dealing with unpredictable fans, and facing potential security threats in a confined space. Elvis quickly transitioned to private travel. Early in his career, this might have meant chartered planes, but eventually he acquired his own fleet, most famously the converted Convair 880 jet. He named the Lisa Marie, and a smaller Lockheed Jetstar. Flying private allowed Elvis and his entourage to bypass public terminals entirely, often using smaller private airfields or separate sections of larger airports, fixed base operators or FBOS. This drastically reduced his exposure to the general public and allowed for much tighter control over who came near him. Boarding and disembarking could be done quickly and discreetly, often with vehicles pulling right up to the aircraft. Ground transportation was equally complex. Elvis traveled in convoys, not just single cars. This typically involved multiple vehicles, his own Tri-Cadillacs, Lincolns, or other luxury cars, plus vehicles for his entourage and security. Using several cars made it harder for anyone to target a specific vehicle and allowed for tactical maneuvers if necessary, like blocking pursuing vehicles or creating diversions. Sometimes, decoy cars were used, heading off in different directions to throw off fans or potential threats trying to follow him. Police escorts were frequently arranged especially in cities where Elvis had strong connections with local law enforcement, thanks in part to his badge-collecting efforts. These escorts weren't just for show. They allowed the convoy to bypass traffic lights, navigate congested streets quickly, and maintain a secure bubble around Elvis's vehicle. The flashing lights and sirens also served as a clear deterrent. Hotel security was another major component of his travel lockdown. Standard procedure involved booking entire floors, or at least large blocks of rooms, in the hotels where Elvis stayed. This created a secure zone, preventing other guests or unauthorized individuals from accessing his floor. Elevators would often be locked off, requiring a key or special access, and members of the Memphis Mafia or hired security would guard hallways and access points around the clock. Elvis's suite itself would be thoroughly checked before his arrival. Sometimes, adjoining rooms would be booked for key personnel, ensuring help was literally next door. All visitors, deliveries, and room service had to be screened by his security team. Even seemingly simple outings required careful planning. If Elvis wanted to go to the movies, his team would often arrange a private screening, renting out the entire theater after hours. Late-night trips to amusement parks involved having the park opened exclusively for him and his friends. Restaurants might be booked entirely, or a private room secured with guards posted outside. Information control was critical. Travel itineraries were kept confidential, shared only on a need-to-know basis. Departure and arrival times were varied. Routes were sometimes changed at the last minute. The goal was to keep his movements unpredictable and limit the opportunity for anyone to plan an interception or attack. This level of security required significant resources, money, manpower, and meticulous coordination by people like his road manager, Joe Esposito. It created a bubble world for Elvis, isolating him from ordinary experiences but providing the safety net his level of fame demanded. Every move outside the gates of Graceland or his secured hotel floor was a calculated operation designed to insulate the king from the potential dangers of the outside world. It was a necessary, if restrictive, way of life for the most famous man on earth. Number 1. He lived with real death threats and constant paranoia. Underlying all the specific security measures, the bodyguards, the guns, the karate, the fortified home, the travel lockdowns, was a chilling reality. Elvis Presley faced real and credible threats to his life, leading to a state of heightened vigilance that sometimes bordered on paranoia. This wasn't just abstract worry. There were documented incidents and intelligence reports that kept Elvis and his security team on high alert throughout much of his career, particularly in the later years. One of the most serious documented instances occurred in 1970. The FBI reportedly uncovered a credible threat against Elvis's life while he was performing in Las Vegas. The nature of the threat was alarming. Someone was allegedly planning to shoot him while he was on stage. This wasn't taken lightly. The FBI got involved. Security was massively increased around Elvis, both on and off stage, and members of the Memphis Mafia were heavily armed and extra vigilant during performances. Elvis himself was aware of the threat and, according to some accounts, carried weapons on stage during this period and instructed his band members on what to do if shooting broke out. While the specific attacker never materialized, the incident left a lasting impact, reinforcing the need for constant, serious security. This wasn't an isolated case. Over the years, Elvis received numerous threatening letters and phone calls. While many might have been from cranks, They all had to be assessed. His management, team and security detail screened mail and monitored communications. The sheer volume of attention he attracted meant that disturbed individuals could fixate on him. Kidnapping threats against him or his family also surfaced occasionally, requiring careful consideration and protective measures. Living under this kind of pressure inevitably took a psychological toll. While Elvis projected confidence on stage, those close to him noted periods of intense worry and suspicion. He became increasingly reliant on his inner circle for safety and trust, sometimes viewing outsiders with caution. This sense of perceived danger fueled the desire for more security, more guns, more control over his environment. It explains the fortress-like nature of Graceland, the constant presence of the Memphis Mafia, and his personal armament. His security team operated with this threat level in mind constantly. They weren't just managing crowds, they were actively scanning for potential assassins, bombers, or kidnappers. Every show, every public appearance, every trip carried an undercurrent of risk. They assessed venues for vulnerabilities, vetted personnel who would be working closely with Elvis, and maintained a state of readiness. The knowledge that real threats existed transformed their role from simply managing fans to actively engaging in counter-surveillance and threat neutralization planning. The FBI maintained files on Elvis, partly due to these threats and partly due to his own communications with the Bureau and President Nixon regarding his desire to assist law enforcement. These files confirm that the threats were considered genuine by federal authorities. This constant awareness of danger shaped Elvis's world. It justified the expense and inconvenience of his extensive security apparatus. It contributed to his isolation and reliance on a small, trusted group. While his fame brought incredible rewards, it also brought undeniable risks. The guns, the guards, the gates, they weren't just symbols of status. They were practical necessities stemming from documented threats and a pervasive sense of vulnerability. Elvis Presley lived a life where the roar of the crowd was often mixed with the quiet, persistent hum of potential danger, requiring constant vigilance from both the king and his protectors.